I am telling you for the last time, you must comply immediately.
Ma'am, I have done nothing wrong. I am simply sitting here.
The stem of the champagne flute never even hit the table. It slipped from the server's hand, spun once in the air, and shattered against the marble floor of the first-class lounge. 3 clean pieces. A spray of glass dust sparkling under the soft, golden lights. Not because someone bumped into him. Not because he was careless. Because of the man who'd just walked in. The automatic glass doors whispered open, letting in a slice of airport noise that was swallowed almost instantly by the lounge's hushed luxury. Only one person really noticed the newcomer. The server in the dark vest, whose fingers had suddenly forgotten how to hold a glass. He knew that face. He'd seen it on magazine covers at the newsstand Tech Titan of the Year. He'd seen it on conference live streams playing behind the bar panels on innovation, leadership, disruption. He'd seen it on financial shows, where anchors spoke about his company in the same breath as the biggest names in Silicon Valley. Jordan Hale, to most of the world, a black CEO who'd rewritten the rules of immersive technology. To the lounge right now, just another traveler in a gray hoodie. No way, the server breathed, heart punching once, hard, against his ribs. Jordan didn't look like the billionaire people imagined when they talked about him in airport terminals and co-working spaces. No tailored suit, no gleaming watch, no assistant rolling a set of matching luggage. Just a well-worn hoodie, black jeans, sneakers that had seen more airport corridors than red carpets, and a backpack that sagged slightly near the bottom. He could have been a grad student returning from a hackathon, or a mid-level engineer on a business trip, or a guy who got lucky with an upgrade. And that, more than anything else, made the room feel quietly wrong. The rest of the lounge kept moving on its invisible rails. Spoons chimed against porcelain cups. Ice cubes clinked in short crystal tumblers. Men in crisp shirts and designer belts leaned back in leather chairs and talked about quarterly earnings, venture rounds, luxury condos, and which cryptocurrency was back in play. Light from the high windows washed over calm, confident faces, people who moved through the world like they owned not only their seats, but the air above them. Jordan did not look like he belonged to that club. He headed for the farthest corner of the lounge, the place where the lights were a little dimmer and the noise settled into a distant hum. No one tracked his steps. No one moved out of his way. To them, he was just another body passing through their soft, carpeted universe. If anyone glanced at the backpack at his feet, they saw nothing but fabric and zippers. No one saw the deal it carried. Inside, on a slim black laptop, was a presentation that could change the future of augmented reality in global travel, an agreement with a European carrier that would give his company, Hale Vision, a massive international footprint. The partnership, if signed in Geneva, wouldn't just be another contract. It would be a lifeline. Hundreds of employees, years of development, endless nights of staring at screens until the code blurred and the eyes stung. Every slide in that deck held a piece of someone's sacrifice. Jordan slid into a corner armchair and opened his laptop. The familiar glow lit his face. He scrolled until he reached the slide, with the growth curve, Hale Vision's revenue climbing like a determined, crooked hill. Not impressive at first glance, maybe, not explosive, but real earned, fought for. One more handshake. One more yes in a boardroom in Geneva. One more chance. A notification popped up on the screen. Team HQ. Geneva ready. We believe in you. Jordan's jaw tensed for half a second. Then he typed back. On it. Boarding soon. I've got this. He hit send, but the truth sat like a stone in his chest. Belief was heavy. The more people placed their faith on your shoulders, the more it pressed down, turning every small decision into a potential disaster. And this pressure didn't come from the contract alone. It came from years of walking into rooms where he was underestimated before he even opened his mouth. He'd spent his childhood racing across 3 neighborhoods just to reach a library before it closed, ducking under streetlights as they flickered on. His mother, middle school English teacher, would sit at their wobbly kitchen table grading essays under a warm lamp while he lay on the floor nearby, typing his first lines of code on a second-hand laptop. His father, auto mechanic, hands permanently tattooed with grease, had taught him something else. Everything had structure, engines, systems, people. The moment you started believing you could never be wrong, that was when you made your worst mistakes. His parents hadn't given him money. They'd given him focus, patience, a way to see past appearances. That was why he didn't flare up when people judged him by the hoodie, or the beard, or the skin tone. He observed, he remembered, and he kept receipts in his mind. Across the lounge, a group of men in blazers raised glasses of amber liquid. We run this market. One of them laughed. chest puffed with the loose arrogance of someone who'd never been made to justify his presence in a room. Jordan looked up for a moment, taking them in, then lowered his gaze again. Their laughter didn't interest him. Real power wasn't in loud boasts over expensive liquor. It was in quiet decisions that rewired entire industries. He took a slow breath, eyes flicking toward the huge pane of glass that separated the lounge from the tarmac. Outside, aircraft sat in neat lines, their silver bodies catching the late afternoon light. Engines rested. Ground crew moved with the practiced choreography of 1,000 flights before this one. Everything seemed calm, as if the sky owed them nothing but smooth departures. But Jordan's stomach pulled tight. It was that feeling again, the one that crawled in without explanation. Not a thought, not a fear, just a whisper from somewhere deeper. Pay attention. Maybe it was just predial nerves. Maybe he'd lived through enough sudden storms to always expect another. Either way, his instincts didn't know how to lie to him. A voice cut through the ambient conversation, smooth and polished over the speakers. Bazian, Air Flight BX 914 to Geneva, is now boarding. First-class passengers are invited to proceed to Gate 23. Jordan closed his laptop and slipped it into his backpack. He checked his boarding pass on his phone, then rose from the chair. As he walked toward the gate, a man in a tailored suit gave him a quick, dismissive once-over, the kind of look that quietly asked, "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" Jordan didn't bother returning it. He'd seen that expression on teachers, security guards, investors, even waiters. The only eyes that seemed to really follow him were the servers, the same one who had dropped the champagne glass. That stare held none of the usual doubt. It held recognition from a world of screens and headlines. Jordan gave him a slight nod. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just enough to say, "Yes, you're not mistaken." Then he turned into the jet bridge. The tunnel of light stretched ahead, yellow and warm, humming gently beneath his feet. Each step echoed in his mind like the tick of an unseen clock. Geneva, the contract, his team, his parents' voices. That uneasy feeling in his chest expanded, weightless but unmistakable, a nameless warning, pressing against his ribs. He didn't slow. At the end of the jet bridge, the future waited in the form of a metal door and a first-class ticket. Behind him, an entire company depended on his ability to close a deal. Somewhere in the space between those two realities stood everything he'd become. A black CEO who had spent his life being told in 100 subtle ways that he didn't belong. He stepped through the aircraft door, and for a split second, if life were a movie, that would have been the frame the director froze on. The narrator would lean in and say, "Jordan Hale thought this flight was about business. He had no idea it was about something far more dangerous." The first-class cabin on Flight BX 914 looked like a luxury commercial, soft gold lighting, wide cream seats that could melt into beds, a gleaming minibar set into polished wood, a faint hint of lavender whispering from the vents. Every detail seemed designed to make passengers feel like time didn't apply to them. The illusion broke the instant Jordan stepped in. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a look. Lindsay Carter stood in the aisle, tray of hot towels balanced in one carefully manicured hand. Her blonde bob sat razor straight at her jawline, not a single strand daring to move. Her uniform hugged her frame sharply, a perfect corporate cut, red lipstick, flawless, smile, rehearsed, eyes, freezing. Her gaze slid over him from hood to shoes, not slowly. Not openly enough to be called rude, but with just enough weight to send a message. "You're in the wrong place." Jordan felt it in less than half a second. The way her jaw tensed. The microscopic pause before she spoke. He'd seen that catalog of reactions all his life, the quick internal sorting. People did the second he walked into their spaces. This one was textbook. She pulled her lips into a smile that fit her face like a mask, tight where it should have been relaxed. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice was syrup-sweet, every syllable dipped in customer service training. Yet there was a sour note sitting just beneath it. Jordan's reply was even, almost gentle. "No, I'm fine, thank you." He stepped toward his seat. 1A. The digital display above the suite glowed with the designation. A soft blue light marking the front row throne most business travelers quietly competed for. Lindsay didn't move out of his way. Her pale blue eyes dropped again to his hoodie, a short glance, clinically timed to be deniable, but long enough to say everything she wouldn't. "This isn't your section. People dressed like you don't sit here." Jordan exhaled once. Slowly, the pressure of Geneva tightened a fraction around his chest, rubbing against old scars. Lindsay leaned in, her voice lowering to a near whisper, as if she were handling a delicate misunderstanding. "This is the first-class cabin, sir." Jordan lifted his phone slightly, the electronic boarding pass clear on the screen. "I know," he said calmly. "That's my seat." For a split second, her expression cracked. Not much, just enough to expose the surprise underneath the assumption she'd made, and the way reality had just slapped it. She blinked rapidly, as if her mind needed a moment to rewrite the story. "You're sure?" she asked. The words were simple, the meaning wasn't. Not, "May I verify your boarding pass?" Not, "Perhaps I've made a mistake." Just, "Are you sure you belong here?" Jordan kept his gaze level. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain himself. He just held the phone where the seat number was visible. Lindsay barely looked at the code, barely glanced at his name. Her eyes dipped just long enough to confirm 1A. And then the smile snapped back into place. At this time, it had a new edge. In her mind, the system, not she, must have failed. "Would you like a pre-flight drink?" she asked. Her tone was polished, but the warmth had gone hollow. "Water is fine," Jordan replied. Her eyebrow twitched, so slightly most people would miss it. In her script, first-class passengers asked for champagne, or a specific vintage, or at least a freshly squeezed juice. Water was something she brought to crying toddlers in economy, and people waiting at the gate. For him to request it here irritated something she couldn't quite name. He slid into the seat. 1A wrapped around him in quiet opulence, the kind of seat usually occupied by hedge fund partners. Legacy family heirs, celebrity faces from magazines. He'd sat in cabins like this plenty of times, but the irony never left him. The world could use his company's software. His technology could power flagship experiences for airlines across the globe. His net worth could sit comfortably above people who had never heard his name. And still, to some eyes, the hoodie erased all of it. He thought briefly of his father, standing in grease-stained overalls under the hood of a car, wiping his hands with an old rag. "You don't dress for respect," his father had said once, resting a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You live in a way that demands it." Jordan lived by that. He just wished the world understood it sooner. As Lindsay walked away to fetch his water, he pulled out his phone and checked the Geneva agenda. Again. Meeting. Presentation. Negotiation. The timetable was tight. There was no margin for delays. No space for drama. If he missed that connection, entire timelines would collapse. He flipped through notes, data points, talking beats. He tried to sink into numbers and charts. But the earlier look from Lindsay clung to him like a burr, small, sharp reminder that bias rarely announced itself, but it always made itself known. He told himself it was nothing. A small moment. An eye roll from the universe. Not worth thinking about. He knew better. Tiny prejudices were like kindling scattered through dry forests. All it took was one spark in the wrong place. Lindsay returned and placed his water down with a precise, overly firm movement that made the ice knock against the glass with 2 crisp taps. She didn't meet his eyes, didn't ask if he needed anything else. Her interest had moved on to the Remauer suitcases clicking open. The designer coats draped over hangers. The passengers whose outfits matched her expectations of first class. Jordan heard the soft waves of laughter drift through the cabin. The requests for aged wine. The talk of villas and private schools. He tried again to focus on his presentation, scrolling through projections and simulations he'd memorized in his sleep. But the air around him felt off-tight. Watched. From behind, he heard a man murmur to his wife, not nearly as quiet as he thought. "Another kid who lucked into an upgrade," the man muttered. Jordan said nothing. He'd heard variations of that line 1,000 times. In airport lounges, in luxury hotels, in conference green rooms, as if his presence in those spaces always required a story that involved luck rather than labor. He closed his eyes for a moment and regulated his breathing. He couldn't know that each small look, each soft insult, each dismissive glance was arranging itself into a pattern that would soon explode. Some storms arrived with thunder. Others began with a single, silent judgment. And tonight, on BX 914, that judgment had already been made. The first-class cabin of BX 914 had nearly filled when the sound came heavy, measured footsteps reverberating from the aircraft door like distant thunder. Not rushed, not casual, purposeful. Passengers barely looked up, but the flight crew did. Lindsay straightened instantly, her posture snapping into place the way a soldier reacts to a commanding officer. Her expression shifted from strained politeness to bright attentiveness, as if someone important had entered the scene. That someone stepped through the doorway. Richard Bowman, 64 years old, silver hair combed smoother than polished steel, navy blazer embroidered with a gold insignia from an exclusive private golf club, cologne so rich the scent drifted in seconds before he did. Richard didn't walk onto the aircraft. He arrived the way a man who'd lived his entire life cushioned by privilege always did. He paused near the entrance of the cabin, surveying it with calm authority, like a homeowner checking who had dared sit on his favorite furniture. Then his gaze landed on Jordan. His face changed instantly. Neutral gives, annoyed gives, offended. The transformation took less than one heartbeat. Richard strode down the aisle, with the confidence of a man who believed the world ran on invisible rules, written specifically for him. He didn't look at Jordan. Instead, he addressed Lindsay loudly, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Lindsay, darling, we have a serious problem." Her eyes gleamed the way someone's eyes do when the universe finally aligns with the bias they've held beneath their smile. She turned toward Jordan, the warmth draining from her face. Her voice dropped back to that cold, clipped tone she thought people in hoodies deserved. "Mr. Bowman always sits in 1A. Jordan didn't move. His calm expression seemed to irritate her more. Richard folded his arms, chin lifted. "For over 10 years, he announced, chest expanding with pride, "I have occupied seat 1A on every BX 914 flight to Geneva. It's practically engraved with my name." His voice held the arrogance of someone who expected applause after listing his privileges. Lindsay nodded, emphatically, as if Richard's preferences were sacred law. She turned to Jordan again. "Sir, it appears there's been a system error. I'll need you to stand so we can relocate you." No apology, no confirmation, no verification. Just the assumption that Jordan was the error. Jordan met her gaze, his own steady and unshaken. "This is my seat." Richard let out a sharp laugh, though. Kind rich men practiced at private clubs, the kind meant to put others in their place. "Young man," he said, puffing himself up, "let's not make a scene. Just get up. This seat has been mine longer than you've been flying." The cabin shifted, the air thickening with tension. A blonde woman in the second row tilted her head toward her husband. "I knew it," she whispered too loudly. "These types always cause trouble." Jordan inhaled slowly. He knew her words weren't really whispered for her husband. They were for him. That soft, underlying sting of bias so many people pretended they couldn't hear. He raised his phone again. His boarding pass displayed clearly. "I paid for this seat. I boarded on time, and I'm exactly where I belong." Silence fell like a hammer. This wasn't loud anger. It wasn't confrontation. It was steady dignity, sharp enough to cut. Lindsay's jaw tightened, and she exhaled dramatically, as if Jordan were the one escalating. "Sir," she said in a voice colder than metal, "I'm going to alert the captain." Her heels hit the floor in sharp, furious taps as she marched toward the cockpit. The judgment in her steps was unmistakable. "How dare someone like you challenge someone like him?" Passengers stared openly now, their expressions forming a collage of opinions. Sympathy, annoyance, curiosity, judgment. Jordan didn't react. He'd trained his face for moments like this. He'd had to. The cockpit door opened with a click that cracked through the cabin. Like a small explosion. Captain Harold Briggs stepped out. Compact, gray at the temples, sharp eyes that had looked down the noses of many passengers over the years. His expression carried the weight of a man accustomed to being right before even hearing both sides. "What's going on here?" he demanded, not politely, not neutrally. The tone wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Lindsay pointed directly at Jordan. "This passenger is in the wrong seat and refusing to move." Richard stepped closer, his voice booming. "I always sit in 1A, Captain. Always. The system must have mistakenly upgraded this guy." Briggs didn't ask for details. He didn't ask to see Jordan's ticket. He didn't ask for context. He took one glance at Jordan, at the hoodie, the sneakers, the backpack, and made his judgment with the confidence of someone who'd rarely been wrong in his own mind. "Sir," the captain said sharply, "gather your belongings and relocate to economy. We need to depart on time." Jordan didn't blink. He held up his phone calmly. "This is my seat." Captain Briggs didn't even lean forward to look. Seat 3 to be felt like a punishment, narrow, cramped, uncomfortable. The seat fabric scratched against his hoodie. The air smelled of reheated pasta and coffee sash. A baby cried to Rose back. The mother's desperate shushing, blending with the clatter of meal carts. Jordan placed his backpack at his feet, leaned his head back, and closed his eyes. He wasn't the kind of man who reveled in anger, but he wasn't numb either. Humiliation had a taste, bitter, metallic, impossible to swallow. People around him whispered, thinking he couldn't hear. Why would someone like him be in first class anyway? Probably tried to sneak into the wrong seat. Good, the crew caught it. Jordan didn't respond. He didn't owe them explanations. But inside, something shifted, not like rage, but like a tectonic plate beneath the earth, preparing for an inevitable, unstoppable movement. Asterisk as the minutes passed. Jordan's breathing steadied. His heart settled. And then something unexpected. A small smile formed at the corner of his lips. Not joy, not revenge. Recognition. He had seen this behavior before. In boardrooms, in partnerships, in negotiations, in every space where people judged worth by appearances instead of merit. People like Lindsay, people like Richard, people like Captain Briggs, they all had something in common. They acted freely when they believed the person in front of them had no power. They made their choices with confidence, never imagining that someday they might be held accountable. Jordan inhaled deeply and opened his laptop. He didn't type yet. He just stared at the blank email draft. The flight hummed around him, babies crying, flight attendants passing out drinks, passengers shifting in their tight seats. Jordan's face was calm, quiet, still. But beneath that stillness was a man remembering the most important lesson his father ever taught him. People show you who they are when they think no one is watching. That's when you take note. That's when you decide what they deserve. Jordan had taken note, and he knew exactly what came next. This time, the storm wouldn't begin in first class. It would begin from seat 32 billion. The cabin lights dimmed as BX914 sliced into calmer air, leaving Los Angeles a fading glow beneath the clouds. Jordan sat motionless in 3-B, fingers interlaced, breathing slow and steady like a man preparing for an operation only he understood. Around him, life continued in its chaotic rhythm. The rustle of snack wrappers, the uneven hum of passengers trying to sleep upright, the soft ding of a call button somewhere behind him. But Jordan wasn't listening to any of it. He was listening to the quiet. Inside himself, the same quiet he'd felt before every major turning point in his life. The quiet before he defended his college thesis in a room where no one expected him to pass. The quiet before the investors who doubted him were forced to rewrite their projections. The quiet before he launched Hail Vision out of a garage that leaked during rainstorms. That quiet always meant the same thing. Someone had underestimated him. And tonight, they had done it again in a plane that didn't know how close it was to becoming a case study in corporate disaster. A soft voice nudged him gently out of his thoughts. "Sir, are you okay?" Jordan opened his eyes to see the younger flight attendant, the only one who hadn't looked at him like he was trespassing. Her name tag read Chloe Bennett. Brown ponytail, warm eyes, nervous hands gripping a small bottle of water. She looked like someone carrying guilt. She didn't turn. Jordan studied her face for a moment before answering, "I'm fine." The words were honest, even if the moment wasn't. Chloe exhaled with relief, then leaned slightly closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant to stay between them. "I'm really sorry for what happened up there. It wasn't right. You didn't deserve that." Her apology wasn't part of any protocol. It wasn't rehearsed customer service language. It was just human decency, something the front of the plane had been utterly incapable of. Jordan felt a small pull in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded once and stepped away. But before she turned fully, she paused. "I don't know what's happening," she murmured, glancing toward the curtain that separated economy from first class. "But the captain just called the senior staff to the cockpit. Everyone looks really tense." Jordan blinked once. So early in the flight, yes. And Lindsay looked pale, like, really pale. "Something's wrong." There was a nervous edge in her voice as if she sensed a storm forming around. Her butt couldn't see the center of it yet. Jordan gave her a reassuring nod. "I'll be fine." Chloe nodded back and hurried away, worried she might be scolded for showing too much kindness. Jordan's eyes lowered again to his laptop. He clicked it open with a quiet determination. He didn't write vindictively. He didn't write with the heat of anger. He wrote with precision. He wrote with the clarity of a man who understood the difference between emotion and consequence. His fingers hovered over the keyboard only long enough to breathe once. Then he began typing an email to the only person above Captain Briggs, above Lindsay Carter, above every member of the flight crew on BX914, the CEO of the entire airline. He typed the address by memory. Then he added the corporate board, then his own executive team, then to major business journalists, not because he intended to leak anything, but because transparency had a way of keeping powerful people honest. He described the incident with the emotional restraint of a surgeon dictating clinical notes, not embellished, not exaggerated, not softened. At 5:46 p.m., I was asked to vacate seat 1A, despite holding a valid boarding pass. Staff refused to confirm my ticket, prejudging based on appearance. I was relocated to economy without verification. The incident occurred publicly and was not prompted by any behavior on my part. This was not a system error. This was bias. He paused, reading it once, then twice. Each sentence sat clean, sharp, unretractable. He continued, "As you know, Vision is currently finalizing a multi-million-dollar partnership with your brand, with negotiations scheduled in Geneva tomorrow. After tonight's incident, this partnership needs immediate internal review." He added, "No threats, no ultimatums, no emotional flourishes." He didn't need them. He ended simply, "Regards, Jordan Hale, CEO Vision Technologies, **." When his finger pressed send, the soft whooshing sound felt like a shift in gravity, a quiet moment from the outside. But Jordan felt the world tilt somewhere in Chicago. An email notification would light up a screen and detonate every layer of comfort the airline's corporate leadership had. Jordan closed his laptop, his heartbeat steadying as if he'd finally exhaled after holding his breath too long. Passengers around him continued arguing over armrests and window shades, oblivious to the chain reaction. Now racing across time zones, he leaned back and looked out the window. The sky outside was darker now, the stars faint against the vast stretch of black. Beneath that darkness, engines thrummed like a sleeping beast, steady humming. Unaware, Jordan whispered to himself, just a breath, not meant for anyone to hear. This was never about the seat. The curtain separating economy from first class fluttered. Jordan didn't turn his head, but he felt it like the air shifting before a storm. Quick footsteps, hurried whispers, a ripple of unease that traveled from the front of the plane to the back, like a wave. A minute later, Chloe reappeared, her face fraught with curiosity and worry. "There, calling the captain again," she said in a whisper, something printed in the cockpit. One of those long emergency messages. I've never seen Briggs react like that. Jordan didn't smile, didn't change expression, but deep inside, something settled like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Back in the cockpit, Captain Briggs stared at the printed alert with a face drained of color. The words were short, urgent, and devastating. Red priority. Confirm status of passenger Jordan Hale, CEO. Vision urgent report required. The paper trembled in his hand. He whispered it out loud, disbelief cracking his voice. CEO. His knees weakened. For the first time in years, the captain felt the ground beneath him vanish. His authority once unshakable fractured behind him. The co-pilot froze mid-sentence. "Sir, did you move him?" Briggs didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silencer. Long heavy silence said, "Everything in first class." Lindsay Carter was already unraveling. Her smile had faded. Her posture sagged. Every step she took felt like she was walking toward an invisible cliff. Lindsay, the senior attendant, whispered, "Go to the cockpit." Her throat tightened. "Why?" "Just go." She walked the length of first class on autopilot, her hands trembling in the folds of her uniform. She stepped through the cockpit door, and Briggs didn't even look up at first when he did. His eyes burned with a panic she had never seen. "You pushed the CEO of Vision into economy," he said quietly, like a man delivering a verdict. The CEO, she stuttered, her lips numb. "But he was wearing." Briggs slammed the paper onto the console. "The entire airline is depending on the contract his company is about to sign." Her breath caught, her knees went weak, her mouth opened, but no words came. She whispered the only thought she could form. "I didn't know." Briggs looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before, mix of disgust and fear. "Your job was to check the tickets," he said coldly, "not the hoodie." She stumbled out of the cockpit, nearly tripping as the full weight of what she'd done hit her back in 3 to B. Jordan watched passengers adjust blankets, flip pages in books, tap on tablets, all unaware they were sitting inside a moment that would soon ripple through newsrooms and boardrooms alike. He didn't see the panic. He didn't hear the chaos. He didn't need to. He felt it. Somewhere behind the curtain, careers were unraveling. Somewhere overhead, a captain was sweating through his uniform. Somewhere on the ground, executives were frantically redrawing plans to salvage a multi-million-dollar deal. Jordan kept his face still, his breathing calm. From the outside, he looked like a tired traveler trying to get through a long flight. But in the quiet behind his eyes, a storm had already formed on. Its path was irreversible. They had pushed him out of a seat, but they had no idea they had pushed themselves into history. The cabin felt tighter now, as if the walls themselves had heard the truth and were pulling inward. squeezing the air between first class and economy. Jordan rested his cheek against the cool plastic window, watching nothing but black sky and the faint glimmer of distant stars. On the glass, he could see his own reflection, calm, unreadable, steady. The expression of a man who had long ago learned how to hide the impact of moments like these. But others on this plane were not so composed. Beyond the curtain, first class had collapsed into a hush so thick it pressed against the aisle walls. Richard Bowman, who once lounged comfortably in 1A, like it was his hereditary throne, now sat frozen upright, his fingers pinched so hard into the armrests that the veins in his hands bulged. He replayed every word he'd spoken to Jordan, every arrogant laugh, every smug glance. He replayed the moment he declared the seat his. He replayed the moment Jordan looked him in the eyes, quiet, firm, impossible to intimidate. And suddenly, the memory didn't look like a young man challenging his authority. It looked like a CEO deciding how much this insult would cost the airline. Richard swallowed, the back of his throat tight. A bead of sweat trickled behind his ear. For the first time in his life, privilege couldn't shield him from consequence. Lindsay stood near the galley, hands pressed against the counter, breath coming in shaky pulls, as she tried and failed to compose herself. The image of the printed message, the name Jordan Hale, in bold capital letters, flashed behind her eyes like a warning beacon. She stared at her reflection in the stainless steel cabinet door. Her face looked different now. Not polished, not confident, not composed, small, terrified, exposed. She had prided herself for years on being able to read passengers, instantly on knowing who belonged where. Her instincts had felt flawless. Then, in one swift moment, the universe held up a mirror and showed her what her instincts really were. Bias, prejudice, a false sense of superiority. Her stomach twisted into a knot. Her eyes burned. She tried to swallow, but her throat remained dry. George, the senior attendant, approached her. His voice was low, heavy with disappointment. "You know what this means, right?" Lindsay didn't answer. Her silence was enough. George sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "They're going to ask questions when we land, serious ones. This wasn't a small mistake. This was," he exhaled again, searching for the right word, "catastrophic." Lindsay's voice trembled faintly. "I didn't know who he was." George looked at her with a gaze that cut deeper than any reprimand. "That's the problem, Lindsay. You shouldn't treat people based on who you think they are." The words pierced her like a blade. She pressed her palms harder into the metal counter, her knees unsteady behind them. The cockpit door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, Captain Briggs sat hunched in his chair, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. The printout lay on the floor near his foot, its creases sharp, its letters still burning with authority. He whispered to himself, voice hoarse, "What have I done? What have I done?" The co-pilot said nothing. He knew there were no words left to soften this. On the ground, messages were firing through corporate channels, urgent pings, red alerts, meeting requests. Executives were being pulled out of conferences. Lawyers were being contacted. PR teams were stepping away from their dinners and scrambling back to their screens. This wasn't just a complaint. This was a disaster with a name attached to. Name respected in every tech corridor across the country. A black CEO, a leadership figure, a man known for dismantling companies that mistreated people. And he had been humiliated on their flagship business route, even without pressing a single legal charge. Jordan had the power to unravel contracts, partnerships, stock prices, and public trust. Everyone who understood the stakes was now trembling somewhere. Between panic and dread, everyone except Jordan. He sat quietly, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the edge of his laptop. Not in impatience, not in agitation, just a steady, soft cadence like the ticking of a clock that only he could hear. The flight rocked gently through a patch of rough air. The cabin lights flickered slightly. Several passengers gasped. One woman clutched her husband's arm. A teenager tightened his seatbelt. Jordan remained completely still. Chaos outside never rattled him. Asterisk. It was the chaos inside people that had always been more dangerous. He watched the silhouette of a flight attendant move behind the curtain. He could tell from her posture, head slightly bowed. Steps slowed, that it was Lindsay. She hesitated for several seconds, as though bracing herself for what she needed to do. Then she pulled the curtain aside and stepped into economy. Whispers erupted instantly. "That's the first-class attendant. Why is she coming back here? Is something wrong? Is she looking for someone?" Lindsay ignored the murmurs as best she could, but her trembling hands betrayed her. She moved slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on Jordan as if he were the only solid point in a world spinning around her. Row after row fell into a hush as she approached. Jordan didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She stopped beside him, swallowed hard, then lowered herself slightly in a posture that resembled a bow, an awkward, stiff attempt at respect that she had not offered him earlier. Mr. Hale, she whispered, her voice fragile and strained. Jordan lifted his chin, but didn't say a word. Lindsay's throat bobbed as she struggled to speak. I want to offer an apology, a sincere one. The captain and I would like to bring you back to 1A. Her voice cracked on the last word. Passengers nearby paused their movies. A man with headphones lowered them around his neck. An elderly woman leaned forward, eyes widening. Nobody breathed normally. Nobody dared to blink. Jordan looked at Lindsay, with a quiet, unreadable expression, an expression that made her knees feel weaker. After a long silence, he asked, "Has the captain read the message?" Lindsay nodded slowly, eyes filling with panic. "Yes, he has. And the airline headquarters contacted the cockpit directly. She stopped herself, her voice collapsing. Jordan held her gaze, calm as a winter lake. 2 hours too late. He said. The words were gentle, but they sliced like a razor. Lindsay's lips parted as though she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. Her chest rose and fell too fast. Her hands curled into trembling fists. Jordan didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't raise his tone. But the quiet grace in his voice was far more powerful and far more terrifying to those who knew they had wronged him. Chloe stood in the aisle a few rows behind, watching the scene, her face tight with worry. She took a step forward, as if ready to intervene, but Jordan gave her a small, reassuring nod. He didn't need saving. The ones who needed saving were the people who had underestimated him. Lindsay shakily stepped aside as George arrived, his face solemn. He lowered his head respectfully. "Mr. Hale," he said quietly, "I want you to know there are no excuses for what happened. We failed you, all of us. If there is anything you request for the remainder of the flight, I will handle it personally." Jordan shook his head once. "I'll stay here." George blinked slowly. He heard the finality in Jordan's tone. He bowed his head again. Undisturbed, both he and Lindsay stepped back, looking like two statues eroded by the weight of reality. In first class, Richard Bowman watched the scene unfold with a face drained of color. He fumbled for the champagne flute beside him, but his hand shook too violently to lift it. He heard fragments of whispers drifting from behind the curtain. "That's the CEO. Hale Vision. Huge contract. The crew has to stay after landing. They're in serious trouble." The reality hit Richard like a punch. He hadn't just taken someone's seat. He had insulted the wrong man entirely. He pressed a hand to his forehead, his stomach twisting. The confidence that once defined him evaporated, leaving behind a hollow ache of fear. Back in 3 to B, Jordan leaned back again, letting his breath settle. He wasn't angry. He wasn't victorious. He wasn't vindictive. He was simply done. Done being polite. Done being underestimated. Done letting other people decide what his dignity should look like. The plane thundered through another layer of clouds, its engines humming with quiet persistence. As Jordan closed his eyes, passengers all around stared at him with a new kind of silence that recognized power, not from a seat number or a suit, but from the absolute calm of someone who could rewrite the fate of an entire airline without raising his voice. And very soon, everyone on board would learn what happened when a man who never forgot finally decided to act.
Half a world away, afternoon light bounced off the mirrored glass of Bosnian Air's headquarters in Chicago, turning the tower into a blade slicing the sky. Inside, corridors hummed with the usual rhythm of a corporate weekday heels on polished floors. Muted conversations, the soft click of elevator doors opening and closing. On the 47th floor, in an office lined with framed route maps and framed performance awards, Mark Holden, vice president of corporate, Counts lifted his mug of coffee and glanced at his overflowing inbox. Most subject lines blurred into the same dull pattern. Renewal notices, quarterly reports, partner updates, then one line snapped into focus like a gunshot. Subject: immediate suspension of strategic partnership. Discussions: incident on Flight BX914. The sender field made his pulse stutter. From Jordan Hale, CEO, Hale Vision Technologies. For a fraction of a second he thought, this has to be some kind of mistake. A prank. A phishing test. Then his fingers went slack. The mug slipped from his hand, shattered on the stone floor. Hot coffee splashing across his shoes and chair legs. He didn't even register the burn. "We're done," he whispered to no one. Assistants looked in through the glass wall of his office, startled by the sound. Mark didn't bother to explain. He didn't reach for napkins. He didn't call facilities. His entire focus tunneled down to that single email. He clicked it open. There it was, clinical, controlled, lethal. A detailed account of discrimination on BX914. A clear statement that the incident was not a misunderstanding. And a line about Hale Vision immediately reconsidering their pending multi-million-dollar partnership with the airline. No threats. No yelling. Just facts. And a signature that carried enough weight to crush their expansion. Plans in an instant. Mark's chest tightened. His vision blurred for a second. He grabbed his tablet and bolted out of his office. "Where are you?" His assistant started. "Langford," he blurted, already halfway down the hall. "I need Evan. Now." On the 52nd floor, inside a boardroom with a panoramic view of the city, Evan Langford, the CEO of Bazzi & Air, sat at the head of a long table, half listening to a presentation on fuel hedging. Graphs flashed on the wall. Lines rose and fell. Numbers floated in the air like abstract art. He was bored. He was thinking about the Hale Vision contract. He was thinking about digital overlays in cabins. Immersive experiences he could brag about at conferences. Press releases about innovation. He wasn't thinking about flight. BX914. Not yet. The doors burst open without warning. Mark strode in, breathing hard, ignoring protocol, ignoring the stunned faces around the table. "Evan," he said, voice cracking slightly, "you need to see this right now." The board members turned. Offended at the interruption, Evan's first instinct was irritation. "Mark, we're in the middle of it. Can't wait," Mark said. Something in his tone made Evan pause. He extended a hand. Mark placed the tablet in his grip like it weighed 50 pounds. Evan read the sender's name, Jordan. His stomach lurched. His eyes darted. To the subject line, then to the body of the email. His face went from annoyed to blank to horrified in less time than it took for the projectors. Graph to change slides. The room fell silent. No one needed to ask what was in the email. They saw it in his expression, the way his jaw clenched, the way his knuckles whitened around the tablet, the way the air in the room snapped from casual to critical. "Is it?" One board member ventured carefully. "About the partnership." Evan looked up, his gaze hard as steel. "It's about everything." He straightened so abruptly his chair screeched backward. "He's on one of our planes right now," Mark said softly. "BX914. Evan didn't hesitate. "Get me the cockpit now." The fuel hedging presenter fell silent. The charts on the wall suddenly felt ridiculous. Within seconds, operations had patched a direct line through to the aircraft barreling toward Europe, in the cockpit of BX914. The interphone chimed with a tone the crew rarely heard. "Priority from headquarters," the co-pilot answered. Expecting routine instructions, what he got instead was a verbal lightning bolt. "Flight BX914. This is Chicago HQ. We need immediate confirmation on the handling of passenger Jordan Hale." The co-pilot's eyes flicked to Briggs, who had already gone pale. "He's in economy," the co-pilot answered cautiously. There was a pause on the line, a pause heavy enough to thicken the air. "Captain Briggs," came the next voice, colder, more direct. "Evan himself. You will write a full incident report upon landing. The entire crew involved will remain on board for questioning. Until then, you are instructed to treat Mr. Hale with the highest possible priority and respect. Do you understand?" Briggs swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Yes, sir," he managed. The line cut. He stared at the instrument panel, but the gauges blurred, fading behind a haze of panic. Sweat crawled down his back. He'd flown through engine issues, storms, bird strikes. Nothing had made his hands shake like this. In the galley, George received the follow-up printer message, the same bright red header, the same urgent tone. spelling out what they already feared: crew involved in incident with passenger. Hale will be subject to immediate internal review and possible suspension. No crew member may disembark or sign off duty until cleared. He carried the strip of paper like a verdict. Lindsay watched his face closely. What does it say? She whispered. George's jaw tightened. You should start thinking about what you're going to tell the investigators. Her knees nearly buckled. I was following you. Were following your assumptions, George said quietly. And the captain was following his. Now the airline has to deal with what that costs. She pressed a hand to her chest as if she could slow her own racing heart. I'll talk to him, she murmured suddenly. I'll apologize again. Maybe he'll... George shook his head. This isn't between you and a passenger anymore. This is between the passenger and the company. In 3 to B, Jordan could feel the attention building. Passengers weren't stupid. They recognized when something unusual was happening. Even if they didn't know the details, they saw the way crew members glanced nervously toward the back. They heard the coded exchanges. They noticed the way everyone who walked past Jordan's row straightened, as if passing a supervisor. Whispers drifted around him. Is he some VIP? Why did first-class staff come back here? Why is everyone acting like they're afraid of him? Jordan didn't answer any of them. He didn't need to. He simply watched the aisle, eyes half-lidded, breathing calm. Chloe reappeared, holding a fresh bottle of water. Her hands shook as she set it down on his tray. They just told us we're staying after landing, she murmured. The crew, I mean. For an investigation, Jordan's gaze softened for a moment. She was the only one who had treated him like a human being without knowing his position. You didn't do anything wrong, he said quietly. Her eyes flickered. I still feel like we all did. Because no one said anything. He nodded slowly. That's how this kind of thing survives, he replied. Not because one person makes a bad choice, but because everyone else decides to stay quiet. Her throat tightened. She looked down, taking in the truth of his words like a weight she hadn't expected. If they ask, she whispered, I'm going to tell them exactly what I saw. Jordan nodded once. That's all you can do. She gave him a small, respectful incline of her head before returning up the aisle. Time stretched as the plane sped toward Europe. The engines hummed, steady and indifferent, boiling the ocean of air beneath them at Chicago HQ. Evan moved through a storm of his own. PR teams clustered around conference tables, scribbling phrases on whiteboards. Unfortunate incident. Commitment to fairness. Zero tolerance policy. Asterisk legal counsel flipped through printed copies of the email. Jotting notes. We need to know exactly what happened. Was it recorded? Who witnessed it? Evan stood at the head of another room, face tight, jaw clenched. Hit pause on the Hale Vision press draft, he ordered. We don't announce anything until I've spoken to him personally. Mark hesitated. You think he'll even take your call after this? He'll take it, Evan replied. Not because I deserve it. Because he understands leverage better than we do. Silence followed that line. Everyone in the room knew it was true. Back on BX 914, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Rougher than before, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We have begun our descent. Cabin crew, please prepare for landing in Zurich. Asterisk Zurich. The layover before Jordan's final connection to Geneva, the city lights began to emerge beneath the clouds. Tiny constellations of gold against the dark earth. The plane dipped slightly, the flaps extending. The landing gear humming to life as the cabin adjusted. George picked up the intercom handset. His tone was measured, professional. But there was something else there too, tension. Ladies and gentlemen, he said. Upon landing, we kindly ask that you remain seated until you are instructed to disembark. Certain members of the crew are required to stay on board as part of an internal review. We appreciate your cooperation and apologize for any inconvenience. The word hung in the air. Review. Passengers stiffened. Asterisk internal review. Did something illegal happen? Is it about that guy they moved from the front? Eyes turned more openly toward Jordan now, curiosity battling with discomfort. Chloe glanced at him as she strapped in for landing. searching his expression for any hint of satisfaction. There was none. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look pleased. He didn't even look vindicated. He just looked. Resolved. The plane touched down with a jolt, tires squealing briefly as rubber met runway. Engines roared, then throttled back. The runway lights streaked past the windows in long, bright lines. Brakes engaged. The aircraft slowed. People let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. The seatbelt sign pinged. But the usual rush to stand never came. Everyone had heard the announcement. Everyone understood this arrival wasn't routine. The door opened faster than usual after parking at the gate. But not a single passenger was invited forward. Instead, a man in a dark suit boarded. Not airport ground staff. Not local security. Not another pilot. His ID badge clipped near his lapel. Carried enough authority to silence whispers. Regional Operations Director for Europe. He nodded at George, then walked straight past first class, barely glancing at Richard, barely looking at Lindsay, barely even acknowledging the fear etched into their faces. He moved down the aisle toward economy, toward row 32. Every row he passed seemed to constrict around him. People leaned inward. Some held their breath. Some parted their knees to make space without being asked. Some simply stared. He stopped beside Jordan. "Mr. Hale," said voice low and firm. "My name is Thomas Kerr. I oversee European operations for Bayesian Air." Jordan looked up slowly, no surprise in his eyes. "No intimidation either, Mr. Kerr," he replied. Thomas bowed his head a brief gesture, but waited. On behalf of the airline, he said, "I want to offer a personal and unequivocal apology. What happened to you on this flight is unacceptable." Those nearby passengers, who hadn't understood until now, finally felt the full weight of it. This wasn't just a messy seating dispute. This was something much bigger. "We have a vehicle waiting on the tarmac to take you directly to your hotel," Thomas continued. "If you're willing, we'd like to escort you off first." Jordan was quiet for a moment. The cabin listened with him. He glanced briefly down the aisle, past the curtain, toward the unseen first-class cabin, where fear now sat heavier than luxury. He rose. Lifting his backpack, he didn't look at the other passengers for validation. He didn't look for their sympathy as he stepped into the aisle. Conversations stopped. Even the air seemed to still. He followed Thomas toward the front, moving through the cabin that had watched him be pushed out of his seat, that had watched the crew crumble once his name was revealed. He passed Chloe, who met his gaze with a mix of respect and sadness. He gave her a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that not everyone had failed. Then he stepped past the curtain for the first time since he'd been forced out. He saw first class again. Richard sat stiffly, face ashy, lips pressed together, his once cocky posture deflated into something fragile. Lindsay stood near the galley, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red. Hands knotted together as if she were holding herself from falling apart. Jordan didn't stop. He didn't glare. He didn't spit words, however justified they might have been. He didn't even slow down. Sometimes silence carried a sharper edge than any speech. He stepped through the open aircraft door into the cold Zurich air. The wind met his face, cool and clean in that moment. One truth crystallized more clearly than anything the airline's internal memos would later say. Power had never come from 1A. It came from how he carried himself when they took 1A away. And the people who had failed to understand that were about to pay a price they never saw coming. Asterisk. Cold Zurich air rushed against Jordan's face as he stepped onto the mobile stairway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The lights of the tarmac gleamed like floating orbs across the dark runway. A black sedan waited near the base of the stairs, long tinted windows. Two airport officials stood beside it, posture straight, hands folded respectfully. Thomas Kerr followed one step behind him, careful to keep pace, but not walk ahead. It was the kind of escort reserved for dignitaries, diplomats, and people whose decisions could alter the direction of a multinational corporation with a single email. Jordan walked steadily, without swagger. But every step carried the weight of someone who had realized too many times what it meant to be judged by surface, and what it meant to rise far above it. As he approached the sedan, the nearest airport official bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Hale, your transportation," he said. "Direct to your hotel. We'll handle your luggage." Jordan didn't respond immediately. He scanned the aircraft behind him once more, the metal tube glowing under floodlights. Filled with people who had witnessed a story without understanding its magnitude. Then he nodded and reached for the car door, but as his fingertips touched the cool metal handle, a voice called from the top of the stairs. "Mr. Hale." Jordan paused. Thomas stiffened. Everyone turned. Lindsay stood on the stairway platform. Framed by aircraft lights, her uniform immaculate, but her expression ruined. Her hair clung to her cheek from the wind, her eyes swollen from crying she had tried too hard to hide. Her hands gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Jordan didn't move. He didn't respond. He just waited, composed, unreadable. She took a shaky step down the stairs, then another. Her heels clicked against the metal steps with uneven rhythm, each tap sounding like part of a confession she hadn't planned but could no longer hold back. When she reached the bottom, she stopped several feet from him, chest rising and falling in fast, uneven breaths. "I know you don't owe me anything," she said, voice trembling. "But I needed to say this before you left." The wind whipped between them, carrying her words into the night. "I judged you," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Not because of your ticket, not because of protocol, because of how you looked, because of what I assumed. And I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." Asterisk. Her plea wasn't loud. She didn't beg. She didn't perform. She simply looked like a person confronting the mirror of her own choices. "I can't take back what I did," she said. "But I need you to know. I am sorry, truly." Jordan studied her for a long, quiet moment. No anger. No cruelty. No desire to humiliate her. She had already humiliated herself. His voice was soft when he finally spoke. "Change doesn't start with apologies," he said. "It starts with what you do next." Her breath hitched, a mixture of relief and pain. She nodded slowly, like someone finally accepting the weight of accountability. Jordan didn't say anything else. He didn't offer forgiveness. But he didn't reject her either. Sometimes neutrality delivered the clearest judgment of all. He opened the car door, stepped inside, and the sedan pulled away across the tarmac, leaving Lindsay standing alone beneath the humming lights, shivering in the thin shell of the uniform she had once worn so confidently, as the car rolled toward the private exit route. Thomas cleared his throat. "If you would prefer," he said carefully, "we can arrange a new flight to Geneva, private transfer. The airline can provide any level of accommodation. Request." Jordan looked out the window at the Swiss mountains glowing faintly on the horizon. "I'll decide after I speak with my team," he said. Thomas nodded quickly. "Understood." For the next 30 minutes, the sedan cut smoothly through Zurich streets, the city glowing in soft blues and golds. Jordan watched buildings slide past modern structures beside centuries-old stone. Life continued outside, unaware of the seismic shift that had begun above the clouds. At the hotel, the staff reacted as though someone had phoned ahead with instructions written in bold red letters. "Mr. Hale," the manager greeted personally, bowing. "Your suite is prepared. We've been told to extend any courtesy you require." Jordan didn't respond with entitlement. He didn't need the marble floors, the gilded fixtures, the sweeping lounge. He hadn't asked for any of this. He stepped into the elevator and waited while the doors closed with a soft metallic whisper. Inside the suite, he finally allowed himself to exhale. A long breath, controlled, steady, for a moment. The events of the day echoed around him first class. The confrontation, the humiliation, the email, the panic that followed, but none of it settled on him like weight. Instead, each memory sharpened into clarity. He set his backpack on the desk. opened his laptop and dialed his team. Faces appeared on screen, tired. Hopeful, anxious. "Jordan," said Priya. "His coup. We saw the email you sent. Are you okay?" He nodded. "I'm fine." "We heard from Bazi and Air," Priya added, lips tight. "Their CEO called twice. They're asking for an urgent meeting." Jordan didn't react. Of course they were. "They want to salvage the deal," he said quietly. Priya frowned. "Do you want to salvage it?" Jordan leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting to the city lights reflecting across the glass windows. "This was never about the deal," he said. "Not anymore." Team fell silent. "We're not canceling it yet," Jordan continued. "But we're not walking into their boardroom as equals. They forfeited that. Then what's the plan?" Priya asked, voice steady. Jordan's eyes sharpened. "We renegotiate." A ripple of shock moved across the screen. "With new terms," Jordan added. "Terms that reflect the cost of their mistake. Terms that give HAL Vision priority. Terms that ensure nothing like this ever happens again, not to me, not to any of our partners. Not to any passenger treated like they don't belong." Paused. And before anything else, the crew involved is held accountable." Priya exhaled with a relieved smile. "That's the Jordan I know." He nodded once. The storm hadn't broken yet, but it would. And it would reshape the relationship between his company and an airline that had spent years trying to polish an image now tarnished in the time it took a single attendant to judge him by a hoodie. After the call ended, Jordan stood before the window, staring at the distant runway lights flickering like faint stars. He didn't think about revenge. He didn't think about power. He didn't even think about tomorrow's confrontation. He thought about every moment in his life when someone had tried to tell him he didn't belong in a room, and how each time they had been wrong. Behind him, on the desk, his phone vibrated. A message preview glowed on the screen. From Evan Langford, CEO, Bayesian Air. "Mr. Hale, I am in Zurich. I request a face-to-face meeting at your earliest convenience." Jordan didn't open it yet. He simply walked toward the bed, exhaled slowly, sat down. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man could do was make the world wait for his answer. And tonight, the world was waiting for Jordan Hale. Morning seeped into Zurich slowly, the sky turning from charcoal to pale silver, then finally to a soft gold that spread across the city like a quiet awakening. But inside Jordan's suite, time felt suspended. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the heater and the muffled sounds of distant traffic. Jordan sat at the small round table near the window, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. His laptop lay open, but he wasn't working. Not yet. He was thinking deeply, methodically, the way he always did before stepping into a meeting that would shape the trajectory of an entire company. A soft, vibrating buzz came from his phone. Another message from Evan Langford. "Mr. Hale, I'm in the lobby of your hotel. I can wait as long as needed." Jordan didn't immediately answer. Instead, he looked down at the cup of coffee and finally took a slow, deliberate sip. His morning pace was intentional, not disrespectful, not petty, purposeful. After 10 minutes, he rose, smoothed the front of his shirt, picked up his backpack, and walked toward the elevator with calm steps. Not the hurried stride of a CEO eager to resolve conflict. The measured walk of a man who never rushed into rooms where others already waited for him. When the elevator doors, the sound of whispered voices rippled through the space. "He's here. That's him." Someone said the airline CEO flew in overnight. Jordan's presence had wait earned, not demanded. Across the polished floor, Evan Langford stood immediately when he saw him. Tall, immaculate suit, silver tie clip, posture straighter than usual, and executive stripped of ego and armored with apology. A few airport representatives stood behind him, stiff with worry. At a distance, 2 members of the Zurich operations team lingered respectfully. Unable to hide their anxious stares, Jordan approached steadily. "Mr. Hale," Langford said. Extending a hand, Jordan looked at it for half a second, then shook it with a firm but controlled grip. "Mr. Langford," he replied, I appreciate you taking the time to meet, Langford said. I know you have a significant commitment in Geneva today. Jordan glanced at him, eyes neutral. We'll see. The words were soft, but the message was sharp. Langford gestured toward the private conference room just off the lobby. May we speak in there? Privately? Jordan nodded once. Inside, the door closed with a quiet click. The space was warm. Elegant mahogany table, stone walls, soft lighting. A carafe of water sat on a tray untouched. Langford didn't sit first. He waited. Jordan took a seat. Only then did Langford lower himself into the chair opposite. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Langford exhaled and leaned forward slightly. I'm not going to waste your time, he began. What happened on BX914 was unacceptable, discriminatory, and indefensible. His voice carried the weight of a man prepared to say what needed to be said. Devon, if it cut into the pride he'd spent years building. Jordan said nothing. Giving no indication of satisfaction or anger, Langford continued, I've already ordered a full investigation. Captain Briggs, Lindsay Carter, and the entire team involved on the flight have been removed from active duty until further review. Jordan's gaze remained steady. Accountability is a start, not a conclusion. Langford nodded, swallowing. I agree. Which is why I want you to know this. The Hail Vision partnership means more to us than any route expansion we've pursued in the last 5 years. We need your technology. We want your innovation on our aircraft, and I am prepared to do whatever it takes to repair this. Jordan tilted his head slightly. Whatever it takes is vague, he said, and easy to say after the fact. Langford took a slow breath. You're right. He reached into his folder and placed a document on the table. A contract thick. Printed, dense with numbers and terms. Jordan didn't reach for it. This is the revised offer, Langford said. Your team hasn't seen it yet. I wanted to put it in your hands first. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Revised overnight? We worked through the night. A problem that urgent shouldn't have existed in the first place. Langford winced internally but held firm. I understand that, he said quietly. Which is why the contract now includes several amendments giving Halavision priority. In every aspect of the partnership, from implementation, timelines to revenue allocation. Jordan remained silent. Langford continued, choosing each word carefully. Additionally, we're establishing a company-wide training overhaul. Mandatory, not optional. Third-party monitored. Bias training, incident response training, and a new escalation protocol that prevents crew from exercising judgment based solely on appearance. Jordan's eyes sharpened slightly. And how do you enforce that protocol? We attach consequences to it, Langford replied. Serious ones. Failure to adhere will result in immediate suspension. No leniency. Jordan leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, loosely, not defensive, analytical. And what about the crew from my flight? He asked. Langford hesitated for a moment. They will undergo a formal hearing. Their jobs are not safe. The words hit the room like a silent blow. Jordan's expression didn't shift. But something behind his eyes cooled further. You want this partnership enough to fire them? He said quietly, but not enough to prevent the situation in the first place. The truth of it hung in the air. Langford nodded slowly. I can't undo what happened. I can only decide what happens next. Jordan let the words settle. Then he placed both hands on the table, fingers interlaced. Here's what's going to happen next, he said, his tone low and controlled. I will review the revised contract with my team. But this partnership will not move forward unless the airline issues a formal apology, not to me personally, but publicly. Transparent, unequivocal. Langford blinked. You want it public? Yes. A long silence. Langford swallowed. That could cause backlash. Headlines, stock fluctuation. Yes, it could. And yet, you're asking for it. I'm asking for accountability that does not hide behind closed doors, Jordan replied. This was a public humiliation. The response will match it. The CEO sat back in his chair, shoulders tense. After several seconds, he nodded slowly. Then it will be done. Jordan stood. Langford rose with him. There was no handshake this time. Just a quiet, mutual understanding of what had shifted. Jordan walked to the door, placing a hand on the frame before stepping out. He paused. Mr. Langford. Yes. One more thing. Langford braced himself. Jordan turned slightly, his expression calm but unbreakable. Don't rebuild your brand with press releases. Rebuild it with people who know the difference between protocol and prejudice. Langford exhaled through his nose, eyes lowering. Then Jordan walked out of the room. The team waiting outside straightened instantly. Jordan didn't acknowledge their stares, didn't accept their unspoken apologies, didn't slow his pace. He stepped through the lobby with the quiet presence of someone who hadn't. He demanded respect, but had earned it simply by standing through a storm without bowing. Outside the hotel, Geneva air was sharper, clearer. A private vehicle waited to take him to the business summit. He slid into the back seat, closing the door behind him as the car pulled away. He watched the Swiss architecture rise around him like a reminder of how far he'd come from cracked asphalt to polished marble. From being questioned about his right to sit in 1A2, having the CEO of an airline stand before him in apology, but none of it made him arrogant. All it did was reinforce one truth. Asterisk dignity was more valuable than any seat on a plane, and those who didn't understand that never deserved a seat beside him in the first place. Asterisk the drive from Zurich to Geneva wound through sweeping valleys, rolling vineyards, and mountains capped with quiet snow, the kind of serene. The landscape that contrasted sharply with the chaos that had erupted in the skies only hours before. Jordan sat alone in the back seat, the soft hum of the engine steady beneath him, his thoughts moving with deliberate clarity. His phone buzzed at intervals. Emails, messages, forwarded statements from PR teams scrambling to shape narratives. None of them mattered at the moment. Instead, he was focused on Geneva, on the deal, on the people relying on him, mesmerized by the passing scenery. He didn't notice the driver glancing at him through the rearview mirror now and then, a look of recognition followed by caution, as if afraid to disturb the gravity hanging around this man. 2 hours later, the car eased into the circular driveway of the Summit Tower, a gleaming building of glass and steel overlooking Lake Geneva. Executives and delegates moved through the plaza in tailored coats, murmuring into earpieces. Clutching folders and digital tablets, Jordan stepped out of the car into the crisp air. Immediately, a woman in a charcoal blazer approached. "Mr. Hale, I'm Mia Rousseau," she said, extending a hand. "Event coordinator? We received word of your arrival. Your team is already in the conference suite." Jordan shook her hand briefly. "Thank you." Mia led him through the lobby, where marble floors reflected the glare of oversized chandeliers and walls lined with abstract art exuded understated wealth. Executives turned their heads subtly as Jordan passed, some recognizing him, some simply sensing the authority in his measured steps. When Mia opened the door to the conference suite, a dozen heads turned instantly. Priya, his coup, was the first to stand. "Jordan," she said, relief smoothing her voice. "You made it." "I always do," he replied quietly. A ripple of soft chuckles, half tension, half admiration, moved through his team. The air, however, remained heavy. "What did Langford say?" asked Zane, Halevision's head of international strategy. Jordan set his backpack on the table, took a breath, and answered. He apologized, publicly and privately. And the contract has been significantly revised. Priya exchanged a look with the others, one that held cautious optimism. "How significantly?" she asked. Jordan slid the printed contract across the table. Priya's eyes raced over the highlighted sections. Her eyebrows lifted. They increased the revenue share by 30%. Zane let out a low whistle. "And they've transferred full IP rights for certain integrations to Halevision," Priya added, her voice tightening with excitement. That's unprecedented. Jordan nodded. They understand the cost of what happened. Zane leaned back in his chair, exhaling. This is the leverage we could only dream of. A quiet murmur of agreement circled the table, but Jordan said, raising a hand, "We're not accepting anything yet." The team fell silent. Why? Priya asked softly. Jordan rested his fingertips on the table's surface. Eyes steady. Because it's not just a negotiation anymore. We set the terms completely. They made a mistake. They don't get to fix it halfway and hope we forget the rest. Priya nodded slowly. So what's next? Jordan tapped the table twice, softly, decisively. We renegotiate live. Eyes widened around the room. You're doing it in person? Zane asked. Yes. That could get tense, Priya said. Jordan's expression didn't change. Then they'll need to get comfortable with tension, he replied as they prepared for the meeting. Jordan's mind drifted briefly back to the plaint, to the tight aisle of economy, to the sting of humiliation, to Lindsay's trembling apology on the tarmac. None of those memories weakened him. They sharpened him. By the time the delegation from Bayesian Air arrived, led by Evan Langford himself, Jordan stood at the center of the conference suite with the steady presence of someone who no longer felt they had anything to prove. The doors opened. Langford entered with 3 executives flanking him: legal counsel, PR chief, an international strategy director. The group looked polished but strained, like people trying to mask a sleepless night. Mr. Hale, Langford greeted. Thank you again for meeting us. Jordan nodded. Let's get started. They took their seats. Langford cleared his throat. I trust you've seen the revisions before he could finish. Jordan gently placed a hand over the contract, stopping him. We have, Jordan said, and they're not enough. The room went still. Langford exhaled slowly and lowered his hands to his knees. Tell us what you want, said Jordan, leaned forward. Voice unhurried. First, he said, we want the partnership expanded, not limited to the initial fleet. We want full integration rights across all international routes within 18 months. The legal counsel swallowed hard. That would double the cost projections, she whispered. Jordan didn't blink. Correct, Langford nodded slowly. Continue, second Jordan said. Hale Vision will be granted full data access privileges to your customer experience analytics. No restrictions. If we're improving your passenger experience, we need to understand it fully. The PR chief winced. Public perception. Jordan lifted a hand, halting him. Your public perception is already compromised, he said calmly. We're offering you a way to rebuild it. Langford's jaw tightened. He didn't disagree. And third, Jordan said, you will implement mandatory bias prevention training on every flight. Independent oversight. Anonymous passenger reporting. Clear disciplinary pathways. Paused, letting the weight settle. And you will. Announce these changes publicly. Silence. Flooded the room. Not shocked silence. Resigned silence. The kind that arrived when people realized they were negotiating. From a position far below the one they started, with after a long moment, Langford nodded once. We accept. His executives exchanged stunned glances, but no one protested. Jordan nodded slowly. Good, he said. Then we can discuss timelines. They began reviewing the logistics, hammering out terms, aligning on integration protocols. The energy shifted, not hostile, but not warm either. It was the energy of people who understood that respect had to be rebuilt one clause at a time. After 2 hours, they finalized a draft as Langford reviewed the final page. He looked up. I want you to know something, he said quietly. I didn't fight you on any of this. Jordan lifted his gaze. Because I realized something last night, Langford continued. Your company isn't just a partner. It's a mirror. And what we saw in that mirror on BX914 wasn't flattering. Jordan didn't react. He didn't soften. He simply replied, mirrors only show truth. Langford nodded. Accepting the answer, the meeting closed with no handshakes, just acknowledgments. A mutual understanding that the power dynamic had forever shifted, as the Bayesian delegation exited the suite. Priya exhaled sharply. "You just rewrote the entire airline industry," she said. Jordan gave a small, tired smile. One flight at a time. They packed their documents, prepared for the summit's next phase, and gathered their things. As Jordan slung his backpack over his shoulder, Priya stepped beside him. "You know, this changes everything, right?" she said quietly. "For their company, it's for ours. And for everyone who walks into a first-class cabin wearing a hoodie." Jordan paused, eyes softening just slightly. "That's the point," he said. As they exited the conference suite, the hallway seemed brighter, as if the building itself recognized the gravity of what had happened. Some storms raged loudly, others changed the landscape so quietly that only those standing in their center understood. When the world shifted beneath their feet, and today, the world had shifted. Asterisk by late afternoon. The Geneva summit buzzed with the kind of energy that only powerful industries could. Generate low murmurs layered under polished accents. Briefcases clicking open, camera shutters snapping as journalists circled the outer halls like patient wolves. Inside the main atrium, panoramic windows flooded the marble floors with golden light, catching on the badges of CEOs, government ministers, and tech founders. Everyone looked important. Only a few were, and among them, Jordan walked with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly where he stood, not because of wealth, reputation, or the seat he'd been denied on BX 914, but because he'd never allowed any room to define him. Priya walked beside him, tablet in hand. "We're scheduled for the panel at 5, she said. "After that, the keynote dinner." "And the press briefing?" "After the dinner," she answered. "They've already prepared your podium. Smooth transition. You'll be welcomed as one of the primary keynote voices." Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. "Bayesian's announcement?" he asked. "They're releasing it an hour before you speak," Priya said. "Just like you asked." He paused in his stride. "Good." They continued through the atrium, where dozens of executives turned their heads. Some offering polite nods, others whispering to colleagues. Jordan recognized the look curiosity mixed with respect, mixed with the faintest touch of apprehension. In the world of business, power wasn't always in the numbers. Sometimes it lived in a story that made its way around the world faster than any press release. And what happened on BX 914 was already spreading. He saw it in the way people's conversations paused as he passed. He saw it in the way younger founders looked at him, wide-eyed, proud, inspired. He saw it in the way older executives straightened their ties. Suddenly conscious of their own biases, Jordan entered the green room 40 minutes before the panel. A large minimalist space with 2 sofas, a refreshment bar, and an assistant arranging microphones. Chloe. Bennett stood near the corner. Jordan blinked in surprise. She was out of uniform now, wearing a simple cream sweater, hair tied neatly behind her ears. She stood with her hands clasped nervously, as if unsure whether she had permission to be there. When she saw him, her breath caught. "Mr. Hale," she said softly. Jordan crossed the room toward her. Calm as always. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "The airline requested I come," she replied, "for the follow-up report. They said the Summit Hotel was hosting some of the debriefing sessions." Her voice wavered slightly. "I also wanted to thank you," she added. "You didn't have to defend me in your email, but you did. You said I was the one who treated you decently. You didn't let them assume I was part of the problem." Jordan's expression softened. "You treated me with respect before you knew who I was," he said. "That matters." She blinked rapidly, trying not to tear up. "I'm glad." "I didn't stay silent," she whispered. He gave a small nod. "Don't ever stay silent." Before she could respond, a staff member stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, the panel begins in 30 minutes. We'll need to mic you." Jordan nodded, but before turning away, he said quietly, "If you ever need a reference, professional or otherwise, call my office. They'll help." Chloe's eyes widened. "Thank you," she breathed. Jordan moved to the microphone station, while Chloe was escorted toward a separate hallway. She kept glancing back, her expression somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. For her, BX914 had been a disaster. For Jordan, it had been a lesson. For the airline, it had become a reckoning. And now, thousands of attendees at the Geneva Summit were about to witness the next chapter. The panel began in a packed auditorium. With executives seated on a raised stage beneath soft white lights, the moderator introduced Jordan Last. His name met with applause that seemed to carry a different current than what greeted the others. As the discussion unfolded, it's covering immersive tech, global accessibility, future travel experiences, Jordan spoke with calm authority. No bitterness. No references to BX914. Not yet. Just layering insight upon insight, weaving together stories about innovation, ethics, and what it meant to design technologies that respected every kind of person. People leaned forward in their seats. Some took notes with frantic energy. Others simply listened with full attention. By the time the panel ended, Jordan had shifted the room's energy. Every clink of glass, every murmur in the crowd felt different, more aware, more careful, more awake. When the keynote dinner began an hour later, long tables were draped in white linen, flickering candles reflecting off crystal glasses. Waitstaff moved gracefully through the hall, serving plated dishes with almost choreographed precision. Jordan took a seat at the front table beside several world-renowned CEOs and international officials. Across the room, Evan Langford sat at another table, visibly tense, clearly waiting for the moment the press release would drop. His assistant checked her phone every few seconds. The legal counsel tapped her foot beneath the table. The PR chief dabbed sweat from his forehead between forced smiles, exactly 1 hour after dinner began. Hundreds of phones buzzed simultaneously. Jordan didn't need to check his... He already knew the timing. Gasps and murmurs spread instantly. The headline clear and bold across screens. Bazian Air issues public apology after discrimination incident involving Hale Vision. CEO Jordan Hale, subheader. Airline announces new anti-bias protocols and expanded partnership terms with Hale Vision. In an instant, the room erupted into stunned whispers. Oh my God, this is unprecedented. He forced the airline to change policy. They're expanding the partnership. That must have cost millions. He didn't sue? He negotiated instead? This is history. Evan Langford caught Jordan's eye from across the room. Jordan didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply held the gaze for a second, and that was enough. When dinner ended, the press briefing hall filled quickly. Cameras flashed. Reporters lined up with tablets and microphones. The air tingled with anticipation. Jordan walked to the podium as calmly as if he were stepping into a quiet meeting room. His team stood behind him. The crowd fell silent. Good evening, he began. Just 2 words. But the room leaned forward. I've been asked to speak regarding the events surrounding Flight BX914 and the decisions that followed. He paused briefly. I'll begin with this. I don't speak today as a CEO. I speak as a man who believes in fairness, dignity, equal treatment, regardless of what someone wears, what they look like, or where they sit on a plane. Cameras clicked rapidly. What happened on BX914 wasn't just an inconvenience. It wasn't about a seat. It was about a judgment made before truth had a chance to speak. And when those judgments go unchallenged, they grow. They spread. They become systemic. His voice remained calm but firm. I did not ask for a private apology. I asked for a public one. Because public mistakes deserve public accountability. He glanced briefly toward the audience, then back to the cameras. I also chose not to cancel our partnership with Bazian Air. Instead, I chose to use this moment to force change. Mandatory training, independent oversight, reporting channels, real consequences. You let that sink in. This isn't about punishing one crew. It's about changing an entire culture. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Approval. Agreement. And if today's announcement shapes even one person's experience for the better than every mile of yesterday's flight was worth it. He stepped back from the podium, silence total. Stunned silence lingered for a moment before the room erupted into applause. Going forward, the industry would not remember BX914. It's a mistake. They would remember it as a turning point. And tomorrow morning, when Jordan boarded a new flight to return home, no one would question whether he belonged in 1A. Not because of who he was, but because he'd reminded the world what real leadership looked like. Asterisk later that night. Long after the applause had faded and the cameras were tucked back into their cases, Jordan walked alone along the quiet banks of Lake Geneva. Cool wind spiraled off the water, carrying with it a silence that felt earned like the calm after someone had pushed through a storm no one believed they could survive. The summit had transitioned into evening socials and late-night meetings. But Jordan needed space to think, to breathe, to let the weight of the past 36 hours settle in a place could no longer bruise him. Lights from waterfront cafes shimmered across the lake, forming gold ripples that danced with every small wave. Jordan paused near a stone railing, hands in his pockets. Behind him, footsteps approached, soft, cautious, familiar. Priya stopped beside him. "You disappeared after the press briefing," she said gently. "I needed a moment," he replied. "I figured," she said, offering a quiet smile. Then she looked out at the water with him. "You handled today better than any CEO I've ever seen." Jordan didn't respond. Compliments didn't inflate him. They rarely even stuck. But Priya knew him well enough not to expect a reaction. Instead, she spoke softly. "You know, what happened on BX914 could have broken someone else. Could have made them furious, vindictive, unstable." Jordan looked at the water. "But not me," she said, "because they misjudged the wrong man." Jordan exhaled slowly, breath visible in the cold air. "Priya," he said quietly, "I'm tired." She frowned, studying his profile. "Tired of today? We're tired of everything like this?" He took a moment before answering. "I'm tired of always having to prove what should be obvious," he said. "Tired of people deciding where I belong before I even open my mouth." Priya didn't fill the silence that followed. She respected it. After several moments, Jordan straightened and turned slightly toward her. "Everything we did today. It wasn't about fighting a battle for me," he said. "It was about making sure someone else years from now doesn't have to fight it." Priya smiled gently. "Then you changed more than a contract." Jordan nodded once. Asterisk, a notification buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Priya nudged him lightly. "You should check your phone. Half the world has been trying to reach you." He hesitated, then pulled it out an avalanche of missed calls and messages from friends, board members, journalists, partners, but one notification stood out more than the others. Unknown. Number USA1 voicemail. Jordan frowned. Proud's an eyebrow. "Who is it?" "No idea," he murmured. He pressed play and held the phone to his ear. A woman's voice came through, soft, anxious, trembling slightly. "Mr. Hale, this is Lindsay Carter." Jordan froze. Asterisk. Priya watched his expression sharpen with focus. The voicemail continued. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand that. I wouldn't if I were you. But I wanted to tell you something before the investigation finishes." Jordan's jaw tightened. "I'm suspended now. They held us for hours, and I know there's a chance I might lose everything. But what I wanted to say isn't about saving my job." Priya leaned closer, listening. Lindsay's voice cracked faintly. "You were right. This wasn't about the seat. It was about who I assumed you were. I keep replaying that moment in my head. I keep wondering why I didn't check your boarding pass. Why I didn't trust the information instead of my own bias." Asterisk. Jordan's throat tightened not with sympathy, but with the weight of knowing how many times he had lived that moment in different forms, and something else happened today. Lindsay whispered. "After the crew debriefing, one of the junior attendants, someone who looks like me, pulled me aside. She told me she's seen this happen before. 2 other passengers. And she never said anything because she didn't want to lose her job. She told me she wished she'd spoken up earlier. Priya's eyes widened slightly. Lindsay's voice shivered. I think I needed to be held accountable to finally see what I'd been blind to. Pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm not walking away from this unchanged. The voicemail ended. Jordan lowered the phone slowly. Priya let out a long breath. Wow. Jordan didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, he said, people rarely learn the first time they're corrected. She sounded like she meant it, Priya said gently. Jordan nodded. Because the consequences were real. They stood side by side in silence as the lake shimmered in the moonlight. After a few minutes, Priya touched his arm lightly. Come on, she said. The team's waiting for you in the lounge. We should join them. Jordan shook his head. I'll go tomorrow. You sure? Yeah, tonight I need quiet. Priya understood. Okay, get some rest. You've changed the industry today. Jordan gave a small exhale, neither a sigh nor a laugh. Good night. Priya. Good night, Jordan. She walked away, leaving him alone with the moon's reflection stretching across the lake like a silver path. Jordan stood there for a long moment, not thinking about the flight, not thinking about Bayesian Air, not thinking about the contract. He was thinking about the future, about the passengers who would never have to feel the sting of being seen as less than. Because one day, quietly, firmly, without rage or theatrics, he had drawn a line in the sand, a line the world would now see. And as the wind blew softly across the water, Jordan closed his eyes. He wasn't angry anymore. He was ready. Morning unfolded slowly over Geneva, brushing the city with soft amber light that spilled through the blinds of Jordan's suite. The lake outside shimmered like glass. Untouched by the chaos the last 48 hours had carried through the skies and across continents. For the first time since boarding BX 914, Jordan slept deeply, no tension in his shoulders. No rehearsed comebacks forming in his mind. No strangers forcing him to justify his presence. Just silence. Just rest. Just the inner stillness of a man who had reclaimed something that should never have been questioned in the first place. At 8:12 a.m., a gentle knock sounded at his door. Jordan opened it to find a hotel staff member bowing slightly. Mr. Hale, your morning briefing folder has arrived. And the staff member hesitated. There is someone downstairs asking if you would be willing to spare a moment.
Oh.
Someone. She didn't give her name, the staff member replied. But she said she was part of the crew from your flight. Jordan blinked once. Lindsay. The staff member nodded. She seems nervous. She said she won't take more than 2 minutes of your time. Jordan considered this for a long moment. Logic said he owed her nothing. Emotion said he shouldn't invite more weight onto his shoulders. But intuition, the thing that had carried him further than any title, nudged him gently. Tell her I'll be down in 10 minutes, he said, when Jordan stepped into the lobby. Lindsay was sitting on a bench near the window, hands clasped together like she was trying to hold herself steady. She wore civilian clothes this time, jeans, a soft gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. Without the badge, without the uniform, without the authority she once clung to, she looked human, not small. Not broken, human. She stood abruptly when she saw him. Mr. Hale, she said, voice thin with nerves. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I know I'm the last person you want to see. Jordan didn't answer immediately. He watched her posture tense, her breathing uneven, fear tucked behind her eyes, but something else there too. Honesty. He nodded once. What did you want to say? She swallowed hard, grounding herself. I'm not here to ask for my job back, she said. I'm not here to convince you I'm a good person. Yesterday made it clear I have blind spots, ones I didn't even know were controlling me. Jordan remained still, and I realized something, she continued. My mistake didn't just hurt you. It hurt me. It hurt my colleagues. And it hurt every passenger who has ever been made to feel like they didn't deserve to sit somewhere their ticket allowed. her voice trembled. I treated you like you were out of place. But the truth is, I'm the one who was out of place. In my thinking, in my judgment, in how I measured people. She took a slow breath. Asterisk. I just wanted you to know that before the hearing today, I'm owning everything. All of it. I won't sugarcoat it. I won't justify it. I'll tell them exactly what happened. Exactly what I did. Exactly what I failed to see. Jordan studied her expressions, searching for manipulation, for rehearsed apologies. For self-preservation disguised as remorse, he found none. Lindsay exhaled shakily. I know it won't change your experience, she said softly, but it changes me. The lobby fell quiet around them. Staff moved quietly in the background. Guests checked out. A business group rushed toward the elevator, but the world seemed to tune itself around this moment. Jordan let the silence stretch, letting each of her words settle where they needed to. Finally, he spoke. Lindsay, he said calmly, when someone apologizes because they're afraid of consequences, it means nothing. She lowered her gaze, but when they apologize because they finally see the truth about themselves, Jordan continued, that's different. Her eyes lifted slowly, cautiously. I'm not here to punish you, he said. I'm not here to destroy your career. Whether you keep your job is up to the airline, not me. She nodded, tears threatening. But what you choose to do with this lesson, Jordan added, that's entirely up to you. Lindsay nodded again, this time with steady resolve. I understand, she whispered. He gave a small, subtle nod, neither approval nor rejection. Just acknowledgement, and to her, that meant everything. Thank you for listening, she said, voice cracking. She stepped back, wiping at her eyes discreetly, then turned and walked out of the hotel into the crisp Geneva morning lighter than when she came in. Her shoulders no longer buckled under denial. Jordan watched her disappear through the rotating doors, not with satisfaction, not with resentment. Just acceptance. Asterisk. Some people learned through discipline, some through experience, some through impact. Lindsay had learned through all three. Jordan turned toward the elevator, prepared to head upstairs for his morning meeting, when Priya appeared from around the corner holding a tablet. They've released the global statement, she said. It's everywhere. News outlets, social media, business channels. Jordan raised an eyebrow. How's it being received? Priya smiled. Shock, mostly. Praise for you. Scrutiny on them. But the biggest reaction is something else. What? People feel hopeful. Like a door opened that was shut for years. Jordan nodded slowly. Change didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it came from a single voice refusing to shrink. Priya walked beside him as they approached the elevator. You know, she said, you didn't just negotiate a contract. You set a precedent. Jordan touched the elevator button. No, he said quietly. I set a boundary. The doors opened with a soft chime as they stepped inside. Priya asked, Are you ready for today's keynote? Jordan thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. The first real smile since BX914, more than ever. The elevator doors closed, sealing the moment. Later that afternoon, Jordan would speak to an audience of thousands, leaders, innovators, changemakers, and he would tell them that progress isn't built on comfort but on confrontation, on standing firm, on refusing to let someone else tell you what you deserve. But for now, as the elevator ascended with smooth precision, he simply breathed in the quiet strength of the morning. He wasn't just a CEO. He wasn't just a passenger. He wasn't just a symbol of what should never happen, but still does. He was a reminder. Asterisk, a reminder that dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. One that travels with you no matter the seat number, and the world, finally, had been forced to understand that.